Episode 7 of Spooktober. Freddy Kruger Meets the Gentleman Tentacle by Mrs. Kruger, 613. Even with as long as he'd resided in Dream Realm, there were places he hadn't yet been, and he decided to explore one such area. So far, it didn't look any different from any of the other parts of Dream Realm. But suddenly, Freddy noticed something wrap around his ankles. He quickly looked down and saw 2 green tentacles that were wrapping the lower parts of his ankle. He was about to cut them off with his serrated knives, but 2 more grabbed his arms, and the one holding his right arm tore it off. He screamed loudly, and it was immediately silenced by another tentacle. A purple tentacle, wearing a monocle and top hat, appeared in front of him and said,
"I'm terribly sorry, but I had to make sure you couldn't get away or injured. I promise you will enjoy this more if you relax."
Freddy's response was muffled by the tentacle covering his throat. It was removed, and Freddy said, "What the fuck do you mean I will enjoy this?" The tentacle man nearly laughed as more tentacles appeared to take off Freddy's clothing. Freddy struggled, and the tentacles restraining him tightened. The tentacles got his clothes off and even folded them neatly so he could wear them again after they finished the job. He felt 2 tentacles caressing his ass and felt another using its slime as lube before entering, somewhat roughly, into the puckering anus of Freddy Kruger. Freddy moaned aloud as the tip of the intruder brushed against his prostate, and the tentacle that had left his mouth returned to continuously fuck his mouth hole. As he was being fucked from both ends, the purple tentacle, no longer wearing its top hat and monocle, wrapped itself around the hardening member of Freddy Kruger and started squeezing and rubbing. He moaned again, no longer wearing its top hat and monocle, wrapped itself around Freddy Kruger's hardening cock and started squeezing and rubbing. Freddy was covered in a thin layer of slime that moistened his rough and broily skin. He moaned again around the tentacle in his mouth. The 2 tentacles that has been face fucking and ass fucking him switched as the tentacle monster wanted to feel more pleasure. Freddy Kruger was in a complete experience of pleasure. The pain that he was feeling in his ass had vanished, replaced by the immense pleasure he experienced as the thick, slimy tentacle hit his anal G-spot. Freddy kept moaning and moaning as Mr. Tentacle kept jerking him off with one. But Freddy would not expect what came next. Freddy quickly yelped as he shockingly felt another tentacle slowly touch the tip of his head, of his member, slowly touching the tip of his urethra. Freddy realized the motives of that singular tentacle and tried to scream as a small and thin tentacle entered the urethra of Freddy Kruger. Freddy began experiencing the pain again. The feeling of a slimy, thick tentacle entering his piss hole hurt more than it would to past kidney stones. Yet, the pain was matched by the pleasure he was experiencing from the other tentacles. Freddy couldn't describe what he was feeling. The experiences that he was surrounding confused him as he was overstimulated. He had 5 different squid tentacles working his cock, while another 2 tentacles had entered his anus, stretching it wide. Freddy was overwhelmed by the amount of tentacles, but it wasn't his choice. He was at the whim of Mr. Tentacle. He never dreamed that he would actually enjoy being helpless. He was so used to being in control. He was used to being the rapist, not the rape victim. And yet these tentacles were making him moan loudly, like a $10 whore, and he loved it. He didn't only love the pleasure, but he was starting to enjoy the pain as well, feeling the squid tentacle dock his urethra. The pain, he soon figured out, was just a twisted version of pleasure, and himself being a twisted version, a nightmare, a figment yet also a reality of the imaginations of scared, sleep-deprived teens. He knew what it was like to be twisted, and this twisted pleasure that he was experiencing perfected his sense of monstrosity. Everywhere the tentacles touched him burned. It burned, but in the best way. He felt himself nearing the peak, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could hold back. He could then feel the squid tentacle wrapping tight and firm around his cock, making sure he wouldn't be able to release his orgasm just yet. The tentacles thrusted in and out of Freddy. Freddy's helpless body acting like a rag doll to this powerful tentacle monster. Finally, the tentacles left Freddy's anus, leaving him gaping. His asshole was like an unexplored cavern that was totally empty, a total vacuum. But then, the 3 tentacles that just moments ago were penetrating his ass were now spewing a white liquid into his ass, filling up the cavern that the 3 tentacles had made. Just then, the tentacle that was wrapped around his cock finally let go and stopped edging Freddy as he was finally able to climax. Because of the sounding performed by the small tentacle that entered his urethra, Freddy's cum was a mixture of semen and blood. It almost looked as if he was producing a ketchup and mayo sauce because of the pinkish white creamy texture that his cum possessed. The tentacle set him gently on the ground, and the purple one, once again wearing its top hat and monocle, handed him a cup of tea.
"Now then,"
it said, sounding somewhat smug.
"Didn't I tell you you had enjoyed yourself?"
Freddy didn't answer as he held the tea. He was left a mess. The cum, or whatever the white liquid was, seeping out of his asshole as he tried to sip the tea and nourish his dehydrated body. The tentacles all left and Freddy was alone. He tried to find the arm that was ripped off and reattached it, finally finishing his tea and getting dressed. Freddy knew that he was going to be visiting this section of Dream World again. The end.